Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Contemporary Issues here on August 18. We are going to talk today. Ron is going to present about conquering your deceptive mind, making better decisions and critical thinking. Skills we can use in every category of life, for sure. So welcome, but before we get started, our usual announcements. Zoomers, please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen. And we are recording this for future playback. And maybe even put our phones on silent mode if they're not already. And things to announce. September 1, we're having a little potluck.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say, Alice?
There's a sign-up sheet going around if you didn't catch it last week. Sign up if you want to come. I need to know, have a head count.
Anybody need it?
5 o'clock, it's all in.
5 o'clock at Puning's house. We'll give you the address. If you don't already have it, ask on the way out. Hope you all can come and just have a little fellowship and food.
Great. And one more thing. Our fearless leader here has a birthday this Wednesday.
Oh, thank you. 29. Yes. Oh, I'll be 68. I share a birthday with Reverend Mark Feldmeyer too, the same day. Yes, it is the same day.
He's 58.
Yes. Thank you, Alice. Appreciate that. No, not the same year. I'm about 9 or 10 years ahead of Mark, but you can always wish him one too. This week in the news, looking forward to the Democratic Convention. Should be some good entertainment there. We shall see. And there's a big speaker each night. I think is Biden tomorrow night, Monday, I think, and then Obama next night, and they work up to Harris on like Thursday night, I think. Yeah, so that should be entertaining week. Any other announcements? Jim and Jane.
Jane and I will have been married 75 years.
Wow.
On Thursday.
On Thursday.
I tell her it seems like 76.
Seems like. Okay.
Flowers.
Will there be
Yeah.
a sheet cake next Sunday?
Well, we might have to celebrate you next Sunday.
Birthday.
He gets to be 100.
When you get to be 100.
75 are the hard.
Jimmy Carter is
Make it.
trying to get to 100. Jimmy Carter on October 1st, he'll be 100. And he's trying to stretch it for 6 more weeks. Yes, Jimmy Carter. No. Very good. Okay, Ron, looking forward to this good topic. Always
right.
good to learn how to think better.
Put things up
Right.
here.
We'll hit the share screen so we can also share with our Zoomers.
I have a bit of trivia.
Okay, Jim has some trivia. Go
There's
ahead.
7 million Jews in Israel and 8 million Jews in the US.
Okay.
There's more Jews in the US than there are in Israel.
Amazing.
Interesting.
It's a much bigger place.
A bigger place, some more space. That's true. And we will be praying this week for the Gaza-Israel ceasefire. Hopefully they say it's very close to being agreed on, and hopefully they can bring those hostages back.
And peaceful protests in Chicago.
All right.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest in Chicago. Hope it'll stay peaceful. That's right.
First.
I
Okay.
wish Netanyahu would end his political activity. He's too militant, I think.
Okay. Yes, lots going on in the news. All right, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. I've always been interested in why people think and how they think and their mental processes. I remember in 8th grade English, we practiced and learned the art of debating. And I was intrigued then. What do people use for good logic, bad logic, facts, lies, et cetera, et cetera? Here's a book I bought in a Christian bookstore in Oak Ridge, Tennessee around 1975. no, 77.
In Oak Ridge.
Yeah, and it's out of print, but it was written by a very Christian author. But it was a good book, and some of his fallacies are in the distributed material this morning. A couple other great resources. This is one of the best ones on logic, mastering logical fallacies. And there's a nice summary in the front of many, many kinds that we don't get a chance to talk to this morning. And then one of the best books on critical thinking. It's very readable. You can read it in big print, small pages, and practically 1 or 2 sittings. Models for critical thinking. All righty. Our opening slide. I love that scene from The Wizard of Oz where the Cowardly Lion is saying, I do believe in spooks. I do believe in spooks. As the witch is sending her flying monkeys out to do bad things. And then, of course, the Aristotle quote there. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And there's many kinds of intelligence. I know Gardner's concept of intelligence that was put forth in the, I think, 70s, talked about 7 basic kinds of intelligence. But there's intrapersonal and interpersonal, were 2 of the 7. And I was always intrigued by how well or not so well I did in particularly those 2 categories. And always wondering about, can you improve your intrapersonal and your interpersonal intelligence? And I think the scholars that decide the answer is definitely yes. All right, next slide. Peanuts. I love this cartoon. Lucy is saying there, clouds are very peculiar, Linus. Sometimes they seem to form actual words. Charlie Brown comes in and says, those aren't clouds, that's skywriting. Next one, she kind of gives him a snarly look, goes back and says, clouds are very peculiar, Linus. Sometimes they seem to form actual words. And this is what we call pigheadedness. The fool convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And then there's a quote I like, whenever a child learns critical thinking, somewhere a conspiracy theory dies. In this week's, or was it last week's paper, there was a review of this book, which I've just started reading, The Quiet Damage by Jocelyn Cook, QAnon and the Destruction of the American Family. She goes through and is giving cases where people have been lured into cults, conspiracy thinking, and where it's done a lot of harm to their lives and family. So we'll pass that.
Jones, that guy Jones.
Jim Jones, yes.
Yeah. How many people died with that?
It was close to 1,000. Yeah. All right. So there's some of the better books. Much of the material for this class comes from the great course that I'm always touting, Your Deceptive Mind, a scientific guide to critical thinking skills. A great course, well worth listening to and enjoying. All right. Richard Feynman, you've heard me quote him before. First principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. And I like to think about that every day. I like to try to improve my thinking, get rid of biases, try to be more open, and not get locked into a bubble. There's a scene there from the movie Damn Yankees. That was a musical, I think hit the Broadway scene in the late 50s. But there's a song, you gotta have heart as you play baseball. And then there's the quote from another Aristotelian quote, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. This is a reminder to all of us that we can become great scientific or critical thinkers, but if we don't have any empathy or love or love for mankind undergirding it, we're going to end up with rotten results and do a lot of bad things to the world. So you got to balance your good thinking with empathy, kindness, love. Next slide. There's Jack Nicholson hollering out in a movie. We'll see. You can't handle the truth. What movie was that from? Does anybody remember?
Good man.
A Few Good Men, right. The truth can be scary, painful, force us to re-examine our religion, politics, friendships, and confront our ego. Sometimes it's scary to face the truth. It can also set us free, bring long-sought peace, allow forgiveness, and be an act of love. So I'm going to open up by asking the class a question. Do you want to know the truth about everything? Your relationships, your marriage, your religion, politics, state of the country, your health? Do you want to know the truth? Let's get some. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of, in the medical world, they have so many tests now that can reveal things like Alzheimer's years ahead of time, but there's nothing we can do about it in many cases. So do we really want to know the truth? Sometimes it's more harmful to know the truth than not in those cases.
Okay.
Conversely, do we want others to know the truth about us?
Behind.
Good question. Well, we probably want them to know, hopefully see our better side, but we definitely probably don't want them to see our darker side.
And I think selective truth may be one of the things to avoid when trying to do critical thinking.
Well, and as a teacher, do I really want to know what my students think? Because nowadays they'll post it online.
When your teenagers took the car out on Friday night, do you really want to know everything that happened?
I have to plug in for all. Yes, there are things that you can do. You can improve your diet, you can exercise, you can socialize. So Alzheimer's isn't a final thing.
Okay,
good.
You can slow it down, or you can slow it down.
Did you get this over there?
okay. All right. There's a quote by a famous Roman there, Marcus Aurelius. It's the truth I'm after, and the truth never harmed anyone. What harms us is to persist in self-deceit and ignorance. And I guess as I get older now, I have learned not to be afraid of the truth. Sometimes I don't like what I see or find out, but in the long run, I'm finding more peace of mind if I keep an open mind and learn the truth and then learn to accept how I react to that truth. And I'm finding more peace of mind by seeking truth than to build an unnatural bubble. Next
How do
slide.
you know where you find the truth is really the truth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fact check.
Searching evidence and sources. Of course, some stuff is so obvious that it hits you like a lead hammer. Good example was when Eleanor Roosevelt found a chest of letters that her husband Franklin had written to Lucy. Okay. It didn't do any good. It did harm, but there was incontrovertible evidence.
I bet she wish she didn't know that. She probably knew, but decided to not.
I don't know. I don't know. Gene.
I think, Ron, you put your finger on it for a lot of us. Number 3. You need to be comfortable with uncertainty. If you have any tips for us on that. You know, that takes a pretty strong person, does it not?
Yeah.
Secure within themselves. Do you have any tips for us on that?
Oh boy, that's a lecture in itself. Other than to say, it's health. A lot of people fall into cults and bad thinking and organizations because they want answers, and they'd rather have an answer than to have uncertainty. And
that was addressed at the deconstruction conference.
right, right.
Income.
But I don't have any magic answers other than to say, maybe you need faith, that you just have to accept there's always going to be unknown, uncertainty. No one in this room can say exactly what situation they're going to be in 5 years from now, or even tomorrow. So I think you just need to have a, shall we call it a faith, a resolve, to accept something, realize some things you'll never know, and learn to live with it.
Did your study say anything about senility?
Well, that's another subject area. All righty.
Ron,
Yeah.
if you live your life in a certain manner, say you and your spouse had a good marriage, you have worked hard through your life, and you have ordered your life in a certain manner, then you can hopefully have less uncertainty than if you're thrown everywhere by the winds of society, economics, or whatever. It's no guarantee, but you and I expect to have certain things happen tomorrow because that's the way we operate our lives. Does that make sense to anybody? You know, as you're growing up, your parents teach you to do good and not bad, and to admire the people around you. And you expect if you treat people in a certain way, they're going to treat you in a certain way too. That's not a guarantee, but an expectation. Thank you, Esther. Yeah.
The definition of insanity comes in there.
Expecting the same thing to happen again and again.
But life is.
You do the right thing regardless of what the results are.
Yeah.
That's what I was told.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback on what you were saying.
If you do that or that, you can still do that and Ron could have an affair. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, life is iffy, and just because you're doing this doesn't mean it's gonna work the way you want it.
That's true. There are no guarantees.
There are no guarantees. Sorry, Ron.
Or vice versa.
I remember Harvey Marx said in one sermon, life is what happens when you're making your plans. That's the way.
Right.
Always have a plan B.
Yeah.
John, you were gonna say something.
Or vice versa.
Okay.
Just piggybacking on what you were saying. I think partly with aging and hopefully comes some wisdom, but the illusion of control. All we can do is to influence outcomes that we desire. We think we have an outcome. You can just do things to improve the probability of that happening. You can't make it happen.
No.
You can't wish for it to happen. It just, you can try to nudge it along, I think.
Okay. Quick note on the movie South Pacific, came out in the late 50s, and it really rocked the boat. There was a song where Lieutenant Cable sings, "You've got to be carefully taught." Does anybody remember that?
Yeah.
And that really rocked the boat in terms of Broadway and the public. In fact, when they tried to bring this song to the South, the Georgia legislature actually condemned the musical because they felt it was communistic and racial amalgamation and promoting all these terrible ideas. So it said lawmakers in Georgia introduced a bill outlawing entertainment containing an underlying philosophy inspired by Moscow. Okay, next one. Okay. In our minds, there's something called rationalization versus open-minded evaluation. A lot of times in life, if we hear something, there's a process called rationalization where we just say, this is what I've decided, I'm going to do this, or I did this, and then try to rationalize it. Here's some reasons that make this what I did right. I embezzled my daughter's college savings money because, and then rationalize it. I didn't.
You didn't do that.
No, but people do this. They rationalize, even when they take a position on something, they can't defend it with a good argument. They come up with I always love people from Kansas, unconditionally, they just rationalize. So there's rationalization starting with an entrenched position or decision and just seeking information and a logical argument to justify that decision. We see this in politics all the time. Somebody says, I'm going to support this party's candidate no matter what, and come up with some reasons for it. Versus an open-minded evaluation where you try to suppress your bias and emotion, and to the best of your ability, try to make a good, fair decisions. Next slide. And then what we call metacognition, thinking about thinking. We need to ask ourselves, how do I think and why do I think? What drives my decision-making processes? I loved comic books as a kid, and I still do, ask Alice. But there's a case where the Justice League, how many ever read a Justice League comic book? Anybody? A few? Okay. But they're trapped in bubbles there. And there was a movie put out 30 years ago or more with John Travolta called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. But we need to think about thinking. We need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, how did I arrive at this position? What reasons can I give for this decision I've made? And is it a good reasoning process that went into this? Or I just totally rationalizing it?
Kind of like a debate.
There's some things. Seek truth, seek facts in the best available unaltered data, erase false information and self-deception, avoid memory flaws, reduce bad logic as much as you can, avoid delusions, and back away from instant snap decisions on critical important things where you have time to think it over and really process it. Next slide. Scientific scrutiny recommended. Not simply doubt, but a positive set of methods for examining reality. Goal is conclusions that are actually true as opposed to wishful thinking they were true. And also, one thing we want to do is use probability thinking, never reaching absolute certainty. Alice was on a civil jury trial, and there was this one fellow who had committed multiple crimes. In fact, he was going around the South Metro area with a collar on his ankle that gave his position to the authorities continuously. He committed about 4 or 5 crimes at different locations and times, and his data, his ankle bracelet, showed him to be at 5 crime scenes at different times and locations. And here's a good example where you knew probability thinking. What are the odds of someone being at 5 different isolated locations around Littleton and Lone Tree right where there were crimes, the exact day, hour, minute, place. And you were there at all 5 locations, but you didn't do it.
Yeah.
You take your mathematical thinking and, it's better than 1,000,000 to 1, you're guilty. But a lot of us often though don't use good probability thinking in our logic, and we need to use more probability thinking. Next slide. Critical thinking, you need to be aware of your motivations. All of us have strong underlying feelings, motivations. We want that new job. We want our candidate to win the election. We want our football team to win a certain game. And as we go through mental processes, we need to ask ourselves, what are the motivations I have that might be driving this decision? And particularly, will it lead me astray? And they say when you're able to reach a conclusion that goes against what you wish was true, it's usually more likely to be a correct one. I think we've all been in life where we really want to do something, go out and buy something, and our logical process said, you'd be an idiot, Ron, to take the family money reserves that we desperately need to put the kids in college and go buy yourself a Rolls Royce. But you can go into rationalization. And your rational, selfish mind, the little devil, sitting on your shoulder, go ahead and buy it. Spend the kids' money on the, Rolls Royce. Go to Europe and buy a diamond bracelet, No, and your good little angel is telling you, no, don't do this. Sacrifice for your kids. Do what's right. You need to be aware of your emotional state when you make a decision. We all tend to make poor decisions when we're in a heightened emotional state. We're angry, we're sad, we're hurting. You need to be comfortable with uncertainty. We've mentioned that. You need to examine if your beliefs are compartmentalized and consistent with other beliefs you hold. There's people we can meet, and they'll have 2 ideas, and 2 positions maybe politically, and they make one argument for Social Security, and then they take the same argument and reverse it, talking about Medicare, inconsistent logic. You need to look out for that. Oh, there's Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's speaking in Denver in November. If you want to assert a truth, first make sure is not just an opinion that you desperately want to be true. How many have ever found your little mind trying to talk you into something you really shouldn't do? Anybody?
Like moving to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Would be an example.
Okay. Certainly temptation to eat something. You don't need to eat that whole pecan pie. All right. Next one. Of course, I love, how many here have seen the original Star Trek? Anybody?
No.
Okay. I love Spock. Your highly emotional reaction is most illogical. Next slide. All righty. Hypnotized into submission. Research has demonstrated that a very charismatic person may be able to hypnotize a crowd by turning off the subject's critical thinking. Particularly, we see this at some political rallies, some televangelists on TV that really get in deep. And it's a way of, they really can, they've shown it. You can, a really charismatic person that's full of energy and vibration and just pounding in can get people to turn off their thinking and be led astray. And the musical Grease. Does anybody remember that from your younger years? Remember Olivia Newton-John singing "Hopelessly Devoted to You"?
Yeah.
The words of that. What were the words? My mind tells me no, but my heart tells me something different. Hang on to the end. that's hopelessly devoted to you. And that's the human race.
There was a time I used that with kids. I was a psychologist in the public schools. And someone would come in and be referred to me, and I would stop them and say, oh, don't tell me about it now, only when you're ready. The suggestion is they will be ready. So it's a hypnotic suggestion planted.
Huh.
And you hear that
Yeah,
in politics all the time.
nowadays, part of our mandatory training is don't ask them for details. Whereas you might have to ask them.
Yeah. But the idea of stop, don't talk to me until you're ready. And that's the suggestion. And they were going to come in and say, I'm not talking to you, man. I'm not talking to you.
Huh. All righty. Yeah. Jim.
Emotion versus logic. When you have a conflict between the two, always obey the logic because the emotions can mislead you.
Amen.
Remember reaching way back to the about 1960, Shelley Fabares sang Johnny Angel. Anybody remember that song from the early rock era? You know, Johnny Angel, she's waiting on him to call her, and nobody else. Just got to be Johnny Angel. We have to be aware of what they call the cognitive bias, a subconscious tendency to think in a certain way or bias towards certain decision-making paths. We tend to accept information and events that support our beliefs and interpret them favorably. We cherry pick information during the day. We collect information that affirms and tells us what we want to hear, and we kind of push away the information
Well, it's confirmation bias.
yeah. And of course, with strong cognitive bias, we can discard virtually incontrovertible evidence. How many watched the movie To Kill a Mockingbird?
A dozen times.
Okay. I mean, the evidence that he brought forth was showing the innocence of this man was solid. And yet the jury just blew it away with cognitive bias and found the young black man guilty very quickly. We can cultivate incredible fantasies with wishful thinking bias. It's just a fact. Next one. Heuristics and cognitive biases. Let's see who's watched some movies. What movie is that picture taken from?
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. Yeah, he kept going through the same day over and over again, and he kept making the same thought patterns. So we have what we call in our minds heuristics and patterns that we set in to deal with situations. Our minds tend to take a path of least resistance unless we make a high energy process to break out of them. A heuristic is a type of bias where you apply a rule of thumb or mental shortcut to arrive at usually the right decision. Could be rare cases where we miss an opportunity of a lifetime or put ourselves in great danger. Some simple common sense fits this description. So heuristics are good because we've got to make a lot of decisions quick and fast. But sometimes our heuristics, our automatic decision process can be wrong. And we miss something because of it. Okay. Every person involved in engineering, financial analysis, and whatever should have to apply probability assessment. How many recognize Kenny Rogers and that album cover there to the left? And he did a song called The Gambler. You got to know when to hold them. Yeah. Anybody that's I can almost guarantee anybody that's good, I mean really good at Texas Hold'em or those games has to be good at probability assessment in their mind. If you're dealt a hand playing cards, whether to you know, what to do, how to play the hand, whether to draw two, whether to hold. And people use probability assessment very often and precisely when they're playing cards, and they get really good at it.
And that means statistics, which
Yep.
is statistical likelihood that this will turn out a certain way.
Yeah. Your doctor needs to be a good probabilistic analyst. And to be able to really say, hey, the probability of it being Crohn's disease is almost zilch, or if you come in with certain symptoms, to really be concerned that, hey, this might be something else. So we find the people that are best at probability assessment are usually good surgeons, financial planners. If you've got a good financial planner, they'll know probability well, real well. Top sports coaches, top card sharks, absolutely. Quality control and safety experts, insurance underwriters. You want to put your insurance company out of business? Start writing policies that are going to bankrupt the company, you know?
Right.
Take the 5 DUI drunkard down the street that comes in and wants a policy. You're going to bankrupt the company if you start selling that kind of
Seafront property in
insurance.
Miami.
Flight controllers. So probability and using probability is important in our lives, and we need to do it more often. We don't do enough of it.
And the politicians are trying to do that now too with polls, aren't they? The probability that I'll get more voters in these swing states if I do and say these certain things, aren't they relying on
yeah, absolutely.
statistics?
Yeah, and if you're going to win, you better know how to play those probability games. You'll lose if you don't.
Ron, we know what the outcome is of the rest of the Rockies baseball game. But we still show up. We still buy those tickets. So why? We know the outcome. Same thing with the football team. We know.
Because we like sports.
Well, we like sports, but we know how it's gonna end. So why not just go to sleep without caring?
Of course, on a specific game, you can say the Rockies will win 32% or 30% of their games.
We're always hopeful.
Yeah. So it might be, it's like rolling dice.
You never know for sure. It's the hope that we go for, right?
It's a hope will kill you.
You're paying for entertainment. You're not.
Okay.
All of us.
All right, there's another movie I like to quote. Robert Redford and Barbara Streisand. There's a movie called The Way We Were.
Yeah.
And they're dating. And he asked her at one point, are you really so sure of everything you're so sure of? Does anybody remember that line? It stuck out to me. But there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a type of bias where people with little expertise or ability assume they have superior expertise. Their overestimation occurs as a result of the fact they don't have enough knowledge to know what they don't know. I remember Dr. Maycomber, a young chemistry professor at the University of Cincinnati, saying the most dangerous person in the chemistry lab is the person that doesn't know what they don't know. They just start, mixing chemicals and heating this and that. Whereas the smart chemist knows darn well if they're mixing nitrates and other substances, bad things could happen.
But you can't know what you don't know.
I'd rephrase that. Yeah. Most of us would say, don't turn me loose doing brain surgery or your eye laser surgery tomorrow.
Well,
Yeah.
It's the person who is a physics person in physics or some other technical field that assumes because they're in that field, they can go into the classroom to teach.
Yeah.
Or if they're expert in one thing, they're expert in all.
Mhm.
Same idea.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
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 All right, value judgments versus factual judgments. When you make a decision, sometimes you have some strong factual information to make the decision on. You look at your bank account, say I've got X number of dollars. You look at your car, and you know it started the last 1,000 times you've gone into the garage. That's factual information that you can use to make a decision. Another way you can make a decision is value-based. That's where a politician says, I will support automatic weapons being dispersed freely into the public. They're making a value judgment there. They're saying, I value the Second Amendment and the right to carry and bear firearms anywhere, any place, anytime, more than I value the lives of thousands of children, mothers, parents, people. That's a value-based thing. I understand how people make decisions on factual information, and I really get upset when people make decisions based on lies or bad facts. That really gets me as an engineer. The value-based one is a different game. I still get upset when I see someone say, I value this particular personal freedom more than I value putting a speed limit on the highway, that kind of thing. But we have to keep in mind whether, am I basing my decision on a value-based judgment or a factual-based?
Or just your own desires.
Yeah. Right. In the movie It's a Wonderful Life, there's the actor who played Mr. Potter. And in this one scene, he offers Jimmy Stewart a job, remember? Brings him in and says, now, you've got your savings and loan, but if you'll come to work for me, I'm going to give you this super salary, and you'll be able to take the wife to Europe and buy her fur coats and all this stuff. So he is putting an offer out there, and Jimmy's got to make a decision. What was his name in that movie? Jimmy Stewart, he's playing the part of Bailey, yeah. So he's got to make a decision. And so he's making a value-based judgment. Does he value the money and financial value that Mr. Potter's throwing in front of him? Or does he value his, I call it internal integrity drive? And he does make, in my opinion, the right decision.
I've read that book by Liz Cheney. I'd recommend it. It's a good book.
Okay. I think
there's a saying, knowledge is like a light.
Mhm.
The bigger the light, the greater the light, the more shadow it casts. And the more you know, you know, the more you learn, the more you learn that well, I've lost my thought. Having a senior moment.
Okay, I concur. I thought that book showed she put forth a tremendous amount of factual evidence, and the factual evidence drove the value based judgment that she finally comes up with. But it's incredibly loaded with facts. You could hardly read the book and say, oh, that's just your opinion. No, she had facts in there. This is clean, cold, hard facts, incontrovertible evidence. Okay, how are we doing on time?
12 minutes.
So there's steps to making better decisions. Recognize your emotions, motivation, and resolve to minimize bias the best you can. Seek out and evaluate the best data available. A lot of people stop searching for evidence. They rationalize, they say, this is my decision, and I'm not going to collect any more information. I reject any more information. Realistically and fairly rate the data for probable accuracy. Use your best logic and analysis skill. Seek out the best impartial advice and analysis. Acknowledge your limits on the subject. Look at all the steps and ask, where in this process I've gone through, where are the weaknesses? Can you look at your own thought process and say, if I was being called into court to defend this, and I was the attacking prosecutor, where are the weak links in my argument? And if you go into a legal situation, any good lawyer is going to look at his client and look and see where their weak links are and try to beef them up. Rate the confidence and probability of your decision. Sometimes you come to a decision in a civil court, they talk about you make a decision based on the preponderance of the evidence. The probability of that party A is correct over party B based on a preponderance of the evidence, a high probability. So in civil court, you use probability of which party is more likely to be right and appropriate. Whereas in criminal court, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Reasonable doubt.
It's not, yeah. So it's a different thing. Next one. Few common logical fallacies. Again, there's some great books out there on logical fallacies. Some of the ones I like the most, I don't like them. This is what you don't want to do. Hasty generalization, basing a statement on too small a sample, building general rules from accidental or exceptional situations. Number 3, and I see this all the time, particularly in politics, reducing a complex entity and attempting to explain it from only one of its many aspects. This is where you take an incredibly difficult subject, immigration, and reducing it to something of such simplicity that you can't make a good decision. Some things in life are hard decisions. Some things in life are difficult. And there's no condensing them down into tremendous simplicity. And often when you condense them into something of great simplicity, you lose the ability to make a good decision on it. Faulty dilemma. Josh McDowell, whom is a good Christian evangelist, he wrote a book in the 70s, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. But in there, he does say, some people said Jesus is either, when he said he was, the Son of God, he was either, and part of God, he was either Lord, lunatic, or liar. And you got to choose one of those 3.
Might be more options.
But there's more options. One option is much of the scripture is tradition based on oral arguments that have come down through history. And that statement never even happened. So there's a case in the spiritual dimension where it's not an either or, there's more choices.
For many years, it was creation versus evolution. You gotta believe in one or
There's a
the
good
other.
example.
Another faulty dilemma. Good
Right.
example.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones we see used very often in politics and religion. You got to choose either socialism or communism or democracy. No, you get a blend of.
Yeah,
it's a recipe.
Good example.
Okay. Some of the other ones, begging the question, reasoning in a circle, using your conclusion as a premise. The Bible says it is true, therefore it's true.
Yeah, very good. Ron, you got about 7 minutes left.
Yeah, let's get some more discussion going on here. Go ahead, Gene.
Back to your number 3, living with uncertainty.
Yeah.
One of the problems of the unquiet mind is you assume that many people today
may have an unquiet mind. We don't have a grand synthesizer or grand comforter. Some of us remember growing up with Walter Cronkite. Walter could capture the essence and simplify the complexities. Or Ronald Reagan would get on the mic here and just make people feel good. Or Queen Elizabeth, when she spoke to the soul of England, the British Commonwealth, and everything was made good. We have so many voices today, so many voices competing for our attention. Even for smart people like yourself, there's a complexity of all these messages coming at us. We don't have people who can synthesize. And I think that's one of our it's certainly one of my challenges. You get so much information. We're just bombarded.
So it's no wonder we try to make a real simple emotional decision quickly. Pick one side or the other, too much information to take it all in. Let's make a quick, simple decision.
Overthinking. I have a couple of friends that I think overthink. I mean, we're talking about let's think, but I think there's such a thing as overthinking too, that you can. They're just emotionally upset all the time because they're overthinking a situation. Yeah.
Ron, what's the role of intuitive feeling in making a decision? Should you go with your gut feeling?
Other people do.
Oh,
what do you think, Don, as a psychologist?
I think that over the years, the learned experiences that you have can be trusted in many situations, but it needs to be checked with critical thinking. But often, you know, your first impulse may be the right thing to do, but
because your subconscious mind is working on the issue and has a decision.
Yeah, and you've been trained over the years in that kind of direction.
That's kind of what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
How about like when you're in a dangerous situation, you feel something's not right. So you're walking on the street, somebody doesn't look safe. Your gut feeling is there's a danger there.
Turn around, go the other way.
So you should go with that, but you may not consciously be as aware as what your subconscious is trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it helps to discuss some of these things with like we are doing in here, or a trusted person, or, you know, Ron and I bounce stuff off of each other all the time. And I'll give him insight and he'll give me insight.
But there's that quest for certainty that we experience, and people are resistant to revising any, as it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be, opinion or belief or value. And, you know, that's the thing that I think we're struggling with in our cultures is the silos are so firmly built, nothing will change, my opinion.
Good point.
and sometimes we have to make a decision based on limited evidence. We're often forced to make a decision and we feel like, I don't really have as much info.
The facts.
Well, or the facts aren't even available. I have to make a call here. I have to make this decision.
You can trust
quick, soon. I don't have time to go deep analyze this situation. I have to make a decision by 4 o'clock, you know, so.
Welcome to teaching.
Yeah.
It's really difficult when it involves a family situation. My brother is 8 years older than I am, and he's always the one giving his advice to his little sister. Well, he's making a big decision that I can think of a dozen things why you shouldn't, but little sister has to keep her mouth closed because of the situation that I've always had with my brother. And it's really been hard for me to deal with that because I know it's not a good decision and it involves a lot of money.
Oh, come on, big brothers are always right. Always.
Although maybe you
Sister
can,
knows some things too.
yeah,
But it's hard when it involves a family situation.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Although, can you find a way to word your concern that may not, might disarm him a little bit? You can say like, I'm worried about, you know, this block of funds being insufficient to handle the,
Well, believe it or not, there's places in the United States that still don't get good cell phone reception. He is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for the summer, and we haven't been able to have any kind of conversation without static, without it blacking out. I think we need to be aware that there's places that just don't lack communication. So we can't really communicate, unfortunately, but it's a good idea. Maybe when it goes back to Arizona, and probably it won't be too late then.
Or maybe a letter, right?
He doesn't have.
He doesn't have mail service.
Letter.
He doesn't have it says smoke signals.
We've just got a few minutes left. I want to give our Zoomers a chance to comment or question. Anybody have a comment from Zoom? Okay, that's all right. Ron, any final thoughts? How are we on critical thinking as a country, as a people?
Silence.
I don't think you want to go there.
How about Americans versus Europeans, or one type of people versus another? Are there good thinkers and bad thinkers in the world?
yeah, I think some nations are, yeah, more stable and less prone to wild swings in their,
Scandinavia,
It wouldn't be that.
yeah.
Scandinavia, you think is better thinkers,
no more stable.
more stable? Would you say the Middle East is more unstable so that they are not good critical thinkers there? That would be a generalization, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you can make the argument that much of the Middle East, a lot of their lack of critical thinking ability is based on a religious undergirding
Yes.
that is totally teaches against critical thinking.
Okay.
Blind, it teaches,
just do what I say.
yeah. From birth.
It's more like a dictatorship.
Yeah, from birth, they're taught, this is the way it is. God's gonna get you with a lightning bolt if you deviate from this.
Theocracies.
Yeah, there's no,
And I think a lot of it is lack of education and critical thinking. I don't think those people are, as a people, as critical thinking.
mhm.
That word.
What about in nature, the tree that grows the strongest has been exposed to winds that blow?
That's right.
We're out of time. Thank you, Ron, for another good presentation. Next week, Eric Schmidt, our class member, is going to present on European civilization, what drove European and Asian civilizations to dominate the world. Pretty close. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. It was really good. Bye.
Bye, Susan.
Come on, you can do it.